Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out to attend today's session on Google Analytics 360's BigQuery export. With you all, you have Anna and me today. So I am Abhijit. I am a platforms account manager based out of Dublin. I've been on the team for the last 2.5 years, and I'll let Anna introduce herself.
Sure, thanks, Abhijit. My name is Anna. I'm Measurement Solutions Consultant based in London. I'm working for UK market now, and I'm also working in the team for about 2.5 years now.
Awesome. All right, so let's begin. All right, so today's agenda, we'll be covering a few key things about the BigQuery export, how to set it up, what kind of data points you can find within the export, and basically how you can use the different data points within the export. Then from there, we move into a few specific use cases on how you can do the data, use the data. And Anna will be giving us a quick demo from within the environment by running a couple of queries on demo data sets. And there are a few questions that you sent us in. So we'll take those questions in, and as and when you send in questions on the live stream, we'll take care to answer them as well. All right, so the BigQuery export 101, starting off with the basics around how BigQuery export is set up. So BigQuery at this point is a very central element when it comes to the GA360, or basically the GMP environment. The scope of BigQuery is huge, sitting in the center of Google Cloud's solution as well. But where it's really important for your marketing data is that it connects with DB and SA and Ads, Salesforce, and many other platforms where you get raw data coming in from your ad platforms. And you also have raw data coming in from the Google Analytics 360 platform. And you also have the ability to actually upload third-party data sets, first-party data sets. And you basically have a proper data lake or a complete repository of all your data in one place in BigQuery. And from there, you have the option to visualize that data, analyze that data, or activate that data. And BigQuery is native integration, not just with ingesting data, but it has a native integration with Data Studio. So it's very easy to actually end up visualizing your data using dashboards, or also just explore the data. And if you don't want to just visualize your data, the other options are kind of analyzing it and identifying a few key things, then you always can push that data through Google Cloud solutions around AI and machine learning. And last but not the least, you can also push this data into your ad platforms to activate for audiences, or you can push it back into GA as different segments and dimensions to actually report on them and come up with different reporting ideas within the platform itself. So what exactly is the BigQuery export and why do we need it? So unlike reporting within GA360, where all the information is kind of processed by GA360, and you're seeing session-based information, data aggregated at the user level, you're seeing your charts. So all of that is processed data. But if you would like to see the raw data the way GA360 is logging it, then you need to use the BigQuery export. And what the export basically has is it has each hit populated and logged within the data set. So basically, every single time you are on a website which has a Google Analytics tracking code, any action that can be tracked, whether it's a page view, whether it's an event, whether it's moving from one page to the next, whether it's a transaction, each thing that can be tracked by the GA code is tracked as a hit. And each of those interactions are captured within the BigQuery data set. So you have hit level data, which you have within BigQuery. And the export by itself is more than 300 columns plus. And basically one row corresponds to one hit. Just one thing to keep in mind, a few of the fields can be nested fields. Like as you can see here, most of the things are at a hit level, but within a hit, you might have a couple of nested fields. You'll be able to find them quite easily within the schema, just to make sure that you're unnesting the nested fields. So to set this up, it's really easy. There are just two steps involved. One takes place within Google Cloud and one takes place within within GA360. So you just have to ensure that the Google APS console project is set up and prepared to receive BigQuery export. And then all you need to do is, as long as you have the required permissions on Cloud and GA, all you have to do is go back into GA, go into the property that you want to link, go into products and link the BigQuery dataset. You can easily find the instructions on the Help Center article as well. It's clearly detailed out. Coming to how the export data is structured. So the way BigQuery works is you have a project within a project, you have multiple data sets, and within data sets, you have different tables. When you do actually set up the link, you have to create a new BigQuery project to receive your GA360 export. So in this case, as you can see, the highlighted one is called GAP BigQuery export. So project is set up to receive the data coming in from Google Analytics. So if you have multiple properties that you want to link and capture data from, you just need to set up one project. You don't need to set up different projects for each export. Once you get into that, next slide, please. We have BigQuery data sets. So as you can see in this case, you have data sets which are encircled in red. So you'll be able to see the visitor ID, you'll see GA sessions, and you'll see sessions entity. We'll get into the details around what they are later. But basically, when you move into this hierarchy, typically from each property, you link it to a Google Cloud project. From each property, you have different tables coming in which contain your hit data, and they can be distributed across multiple BigQuery data sets. And to get into those schemas and explain how it's structured and what are the different options available, Anna will help us walk through that.
Thank you, Abhijit. So the data, GA360 data, once it is sent to BigQuery, it follows a very specific export schema. And it is available in the Help Center, and as well, it is also available in the console itself. It is a bit different from what you expect and what you would usually see in GA user interface. For example, what we know as sessions in GA360 user interface is called visits here. So let's say you can find fields like visit number or visit ID. And if you would search for a metric on sessions and number, then it would be called totals.visits. So be aware of that, and probably just to know what you are expecting to query, it's always a good idea to check the schema. You always have daily tables in your expert schema. So this is not in the schema, sorry, in the BigQuery itself. But then, like for the current data, for the current day data, you may have different types of exports and different modes of how the data can be exported. So basically, you have either batch export, which will give you intraday tables, or you can have a continuous data export, which will give you real-time tables. Both intraday and real-time tables will be deleted once the daily table is available. And probably one thing to note about the real-time tables is that instead of querying the table itself, you should query the view, and the view would also be available for you in BigQuery console. Data freshness would also depend on what kind of table you're looking at. And let's start with the daily tables. The daily table is also considered as the golden data, so you don't expect it to change over time. And it will show you the data of the previous day's activity at 8 a.m. GA time zone. What does it mean, actually? So imagine you have several views in your GA360 property. One is, and the view that is linked to BigQuery is in GTM +1 time zone. And then you have another view that is GTM time zone, let's say London time zone. And in this case, the data that you would see in the daily table will be following 8 a.m. of GTM time zone. So it would always take the earliest time zone available in your property. The intraday table export would happen at least 3 times per day, approximately every 8 hours. It can happen actually even more frequent, but let's keep it as like at least 3 times per day. And for the real-time table, it is a streaming export mode, and it would mean that the data will be flowing to BigQuery approximately every 15 minutes, which is definitely amazing, but there are a few considerations that we need to know about the real-time tables. So first of all, this mode of export would require enhanced data freshness to be enabled, and also some fields, like let's say anything traffic source related and user ID, won't be available in real-time tables. They, of course, will be available in daily tables afterwards, but like not in real-time tables themselves. And a few more considerations around BigQuery export. So first of all, we can export only one view per property. And because it is just one view, we would always suggest to go for an unfiltered view if it's possible, or at least the view with the amount of filters that you have. We can also do the backfilling once per view, and we would always backfill either 13 months or 10 billion hits, whatever is lesser. And if, let's say, we imagine a situation that you would want to change the project, BigQuery projects for a specific view, you would want to unlink your view from the BigQuery project that you were using and link it to another one, the backfill unfortunately won't happen again. So it happens only once per view. Another consideration / limitation is that if, let's say, you have your campaign manager linked to GA360 and you have your impressions data available in GA user interface, in BigQuery, unfortunately, you won't be able to see that because it's click-based traffic only. And same applies to any campaign manager, DV360 or SA360 specific dimensions like line items, placements, and so on. They won't be reported even if you have the integration in place. Instead of that, you will be able to use traffic source campaign dimension to query any kind of campaign data related. It will include the data and campaign names from campaign manager, DV, SA, and so on. Another limitation / consideration is that if you have data that is imported via processing time or query time data import feature, you won't be able to see that in BigQuery as well. However, if you send any measurement protocol hits to your GA360 property, or if you use Salesforce Sales Cloud integration, this data will be available in BigQuery. And the last but not the least, BigQuery is a paid product, so it will have some storage and query costs associated with it. And you will be able to find a storage and query cost calculator or like approximation of how much usually that would cost. One question that we often get from our clients in regards to GA360 BigQuery Expert is, what do you need to know and what kind of skills are needed to be able to use BigQuery? And I would say that definitely it's good to have a basic SQL knowledge because SQL is the base of everything here, and you will be running some SQL queries, but you don't really need to have hard technical skills. So basic SQL knowledge is good, and obvious understanding of GA and site analytics so that you can be more or less familiar with the schema. But you don't really need hard technical skills for that or very advanced SQL skills. Basic skills are usually enough, and then you definitely can advance throughout the way. Another question that we often get is, what, let's say, if some people in your team are not technical enough to use BigQuery, what should you do? And in this case, our advice is that if you have some basic SQL knowledge, that's already enough for you to do some analysis and modeling. And then if you would want some less technical people from your team to see the output, then you can export the BigQuery output to Data Studio and create some simpler reports so that everyone in your team will be able to use it later. And now I'm handing over to Abhijit to talk about the BigQuery use cases.
Thank you, Anna. So in this section, we'll just walk through in very overview level of what you can use BigQuery for. If you can go to the next slide, please, Anna. So BigQuery, the rationale behind having the BigQuery export was to overcome a few typical challenges. So first one was access to raw data. In many cases, most companies will have people and analysts looking at raw level data to derive their own insights, their own definitions around standardization, etc. So the first idea was to make sure that all of that raw data is made available for you. That is one. Next is the individual level customer data. So GA is working based on cookies, but you have the option to use signed in users, and you have the option to kind of aggregate them. So if you want to use individual level customer data, then you can kind of refer to that within the BigQuery export. But at the same time, you can also add data you've collected outside of GA and join it over there. The next important thing is the opportunity to perform statistical analysis. So based on your data coming in from GA, there are a few standard reports. There are actually a lot of standard reports available within GA. But if there are certain use cases where the GA reporting is not completely in line with what you need, so you always have the option to analyze and visualize the data you want to. And last but not the least, as I mentioned before as well, you can tie in other data sources. So if you're tracking something else on your website in tracking, then you can also tie multiple other information sources in and kind of make any analysis post that. So kind of touching in a little bit more detail in the next slide, where we'll categorize these things beyond the simple things. The top use cases. One of the most simple ones is to go beyond the limitations within the GA UI. The way the product's made is when you're exporting your reports, the limit for each export is 5,000 rows. And also, within the UI, there's a limit. So even though you're buying GA360 and it is on sample, certain reports are sampled when they're high cardinality dimensions, such as user ID and especially other things of time. And especially if you're looking at very, very long date ranges. And the rationale there is just to make sure that the data loads in sufficient time within the UI. The next step is custom funnels. So you have up to 5 steps there within the UI, but you can literally look back how much ever you want using the BigQuery export. And you'll also notice that within the UI, most of the conversions and other user level metrics are tied down to 90-day look back window. But when you have access to the BigQuery export to the raw data, then you can basically go as far back as you have information at a user level. So it helps you overcome the basic limitations within the UI. So if any of these cases fit your requirement, then it makes sense to start using that. But just moving on from there, moving to the segmentation of customers or your user base. So you can create custom cohorts of your user base based on many different filters. Based on that, you'll be able to do your clustering analysis, and based on whatever output you get from that, you can use that data, analyze it, and push it back into your ad platforms for custom audiences. So certain typical features probably are not available within your audience platforms, which you can use BigQuery to segment and push them through. Another very popular use case is custom attribution. So typically, when you're looking at attribution, it's all transactional. But if you want product level attributions, if you want to see how different products are performing and roll up things to that level, then you have product level attribution, which you can use the BigQuery export for. At the same time, if it's not just product level, but if you, like I mentioned before, that you have up to 5 steps in custom funnels, but when it comes to attribution, it's only 4 steps in DDS. If you want to really go past that look back window and limitation in number of touch points and basically build your own attribution model, then you can definitely use your raw hit data coming from here. And last but not the least within attribution is that a lot of our customers have a mixed sales cycle where once a certain number of purchases coming offline and a number of them coming online. So if you want to do attribution across both of them together in a single report, you can use BigQuery's functionality to join external data and then attribute across online and offline. So that's across attribution. Moving on into something around the predictive side, based on the amount, especially for customers with a high purchase frequency business model where people are coming and making multiple purchases, you can start tracking that data and predicting the lifetime value coming from these customers. You can start predicting whether a certain customer is going to churn based on their website engagement, and you can do a little bit of product correlation analysis. And very importantly, the first 3 that I mentioned are very from the audience focus, and you can use these data points for targeting and exclusion. But very importantly, you can also use these data points for inventory forecasting. So how to stock up your inventory, what is shown on the website. So you can use all of that. You can use that data for inventory forecasting and assortment planning as well. And of course, after that, since all of this is aggregated at cookie level, and if you're passing additional dimensions, you can get it at a signed-in level for cross-device. You can get user-level goal conversion rates, etc. And all of these use cases I can see are spread across activation and visualization and analysis. So whatever your need is, you have the data there, and you have the integrations with BigQuery moving into your ad platforms and data visualization platforms. You can do anything of those. So one very important thing is which BigQuery field can serve as a joint key. So typically, there are 2 identifiers which are there within GA. One is the Google Analytics client ID, which is basically the identifier for the cookie, which is dropped in the browser for each person within the website. On the second side, if you are passing a CRM identifier from your end as a custom dimension, these are 2 things which are available within GA. So GA client ID or the user ID. Either of these 2 can be passed as a custom dimension, and any data that you have based on this can be joined. So the 2 key join keys here that you need to look at are your client ID and your user ID. And for Google Ads and conversion APIs, you always have your GCL ID, which is for click IDs. Moving ahead, I think Anna is going to walk us through the environment, how to use it, and a couple of use cases within that.
Thank you, Abhijit. So for the demo, we will be going through a few use cases of how we can join and play around with the data, and we will also show you how it all looks like in the console. And to begin with, let me now go to our BigQuery console. I'll just copy the sample query from here. So before we even jump into the query itself, let me show you how it usually would look like in the Cloud Console. Here, as we were going through the data structure, we have our project and then the data set, and we will be using our demo data set for this purpose, the exercise. Here we would see our daily tables, which would be called usually GA sessions, and all the amount of them that we have. And then all the daily tables, like the data will be all structured in single day tables. You can browse from one to another and check it out how it looks like. You would always be able to preview the table, like just see, like if you were to query all the data at once, like it's always available without querying. You can just go to the preview, you can see the details of the table, and as I mentioned earlier, you will be always able to find the schema. However, if you query, like there is also the button to just query a single table, you would need, and you would see that, like, yeah, it would look more or less like that, querying just single table. Another question that we get from time to time is like, but okay, if I want to query not just one data table, but I want to see the results across multiple days. And we will show you how that can be done as an example. So for this particular example, we will be answering the question how we can join some CRM data that does not live in GA360 with our GA data, and how can we probably query and analyze it all together with our GA visitation information. So for this purpose, we created a mock CRM segments. So our data set is called CRM April data. It just has client ID as the join key and then customer segment. So let me paste the query that we have, sample query, and explain you a little bit what we will be doing. So in this particular query, we will be joining our CRM data, the mock one, together with the GA360 data across the whole April. And for that, we will be using the table suffix between. So here you can see that when we query the data table, we don't specify which day we are querying. We just use the star here, and then we specify the table suffix later, and that's how it might look like. There are several ways of how you can be doing that, but we are just showing one of those. And then we will be joining this data together with our CRM data based on the client ID. So in this particular example, let's imagine that during the website visit, we collect the client ID from the cookie, store it together with our CRM data, and that's how we can actually use it as a join key later. And just probably for this example, what we will be doing, we will be not just joining the data, but also checking out how many sessions and transactions particular customer segments had. So let's run the query. And here is an example of the output that we might have. So we have our segments, we have sessions and transactions. We also order the data based on the amount of sessions. Later, we can either save the results, or potentially if you want to do something else with them, we can explore the data further, either with data sheets or with Data Studio. As a second use case, we can take the one on hit sequencing. So it might help us answer the question, what is the sequence of pages viewed by a particular visitor? And that kind of use case might be helpful when we look into something custom attribution related, not necessarily about hits, like it can be also the visits sequence, but the overall approach can still be the same. Here we do the similar thing on querying across multiple data tables. And in this case, we will be using the ones between 1st of May and 6th of May this year. So we will be selecting full visitor ID, which is a hashed client ID, visit ID, visit number, hits, page path, so that we can see actually what was the page path sequence. We will be querying only hits type page, so we won't be querying anything events related. It will be only page views. And to be able to see the sequence, we will be querying and ordering that by full visitor ID, visit ID, and visit number. Also important thing for us, because we will be querying hits, is not to forget to unnest them. And here is how the result might look like. So we will be able to see the data aggregated and ordered by full visitor IDs. So then later we can see that, okay, for instance, here we see that it's the same visit ID, and that was the first visit by this user. That was the first hit. So the user started his or her journey from one particular page path, and then the second one probably was an event. So then we can see that the third one was the quick queue, and so on. So I would say that this use case can particularly be helpful if you want to run something around either understanding the paths and analyzing different types of our user journeys. And if, let's say, we would query not necessarily hits and page views, but just visits, then this kind of sequencing and this kind of approach can be helpful for custom attribution. So instead of querying hits and page paths, we can query just visits and then align them together with the channel grouping, just to see at which point of time actually certain channels were playing a particular role. And now let's move on to questions. So far, we received 3 questions via the form, and we will be also answering the live questions in the chat. But let's now have a look at what was asked within the form. And our first question is how to enable the BigQuery export on App plus Web property, even with GA3 version. And to answer that question, we must say that on App plus Web property specifically, at this point of time, BigQuery export is not yet enabled. However, you are able to see web data collected with App plus Web tag in BigQuery, but it can be done only with Firebase BigQuery integration. So if you have a Firebase BigQuery integration, web data can be also a part of it. And to be able to do this Firebase integration, you can go to Firebase console and set up the integration from there. You need to be on Blaze plan, but apart from that, like all the instructions are available, and yeah, it is possible to be done that way. BigQuery export on App plus Web property specifically is in the roadmap, so we are still waiting for it to be fully enabled.
All right, I can take this one. So this is actually a very popular question that's there across many forums. This is how much data does GA aggregate to BigQuery per day, and if we can calculate this. So this is a question which has an answer which depends completely on how your setup is. So each hit which is sent through, there's a maximum payload size associated with that hit. So in GA, no hit can be greater than 8 kilobytes. So that's the maximum which you can understand which your GA data set will ever be. That is your monthly hits multiplied by 8 kilobytes, will be the maximum data set for each month, which you can segment by each day. But the factors that define this are the number of custom dimensions that you're capturing, the size of the fields within the custom dimension, how many bytes of data is there. So it's very, very variable, and it's very hard to say exactly what is the average data set size. But one thing that you can do is very simply, as Anna showed you in the demos as well, when you're writing a script, you can see how much data is being processed. And typically, you can also see what your daily data set sizes are. So you can just quickly go in and just run a simple count function, counting the number of hits that are there within each data set. And then you can see what the total size of the data set is, and you will get a general sense on how big your average hit is. And based on that, you'll be able to calculate how much data you'll be storing each month. And if you're scaling up in terms of hit volume, how your data storage is going to move up as well.
Cool. And the third question that we got was, are the segments created within GA available in the BigQuery export? So indeed, not all the dimensions that you will be able to see in GA user interface will be available in your export schema. However, if you speak about segments in particular, it's always possible to replicate them with the export within BigQuery itself. It won't be possible for us to have a dimension for segments, but then you can write a query and actually recreate the same segment from the raw data that you have. Similar applies to custom channel groupings, for example. Very often we got a question that, oh, we don't use the default channel grouping, but like we would like to use the custom one. What could you do? And in fact, yes, it is not available as a dimension, as a field to be queried immediately, but then it's always possible to recreate the same channel grouping or the segment from the raw data. So just as a brief answer, like it's not available as a field, but it's always possible to recreate it with BigQuery Expert. And that is all from us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, everyone.